December 15, 1987, Kensington Palace, 11:47 p.m. 8-year-old Prince William crept down the cold marble corridor in his pajamas and slippers, drawn by sounds that made his stomach twist with fear. The angry voices coming from his parents' private sitting room had woken him from restless sleep, but it was the sound that came next that would haunt him for the rest of his life. His mother's broken sobs echoing through the palace halls like the cry of a wounded animal. Standing in the shadows outside their door, William pressed his small hand against the wall and whispered the question that no child should ever have to ask. "Mummy, why are you crying?" What William heard that night would shatter his childhood innocence forever and plant the seeds of a protective fury that would drive every decision he made as a man, a husband, and a future king. But the most heartbreaking part wasn't what William heard. It was what Diana did when she discovered her son standing there, tears streaming down his face. The Child in the Shadows. December 15, 1987, 11:30 p.m. The night that changed everything. William had always been a light sleeper, sensitive to every sound in the vast palace that served as both home and prison to the royal family. But tonight, the voices from downstairs were impossible to ignore. His father's cold, clipped tones mixing with sounds from his mother that William had never heard before. At 8 years old, William was old enough to understand that his parents weren't happy, but young enough to believe that love could fix everything. He had seen the forced smiles at public events, the way his mother's hands shook when photographers weren't looking, the way his father seemed to look through Diana as if she weren't there. But this night was different. The argument had been going on for over an hour, and William could hear his mother's voice rising in desperation, punctuated by his father's dismissive responses. "Please, Charles." Diana's voice carried up the stairs, thick with tears. "I'm begging you. The children need us to try." William is already asking questions. William's heart clenched at the sound of his own name. They were fighting about him and Harry. "Diana, you're being hysterical again." Charles's voice was ice cold. "The children are perfectly fine. You're the one creating problems where none exist." "Problems? Our marriage is falling apart, and you think I'm creating problems? You spend more time with that woman than you do with your own family." Even at 8, William knew exactly which woman his mother meant. He had seen Camilla at polo matches, had noticed the way she looked at his father, the way his father's face lit up when she was near, in a way it never did when he looked at Mummy. "I will not discuss this with you again, Diana. My friendship with Camilla is not your concern." The sound that followed, his mother's anguished cry, made William feel like someone had punched him in the stomach. He had never heard anyone sound so broken, so completely alone. Don't miss this heartbreaking moment. What William saw when he looked through the keyhole, the devastating discovery. 11:45 p.m., a child's first glimpse of adult pain. William's small body trembled as he approached his parents' sitting room door. The sounds coming from inside were terrifying. Not just the arguing, but something worse. His mother was crying in a way that sounded like her heart was breaking into pieces. Kneeling down, William peered through the old-fashioned keyhole, and what he saw would be burned into his memory forever. His father stood near the fireplace, turned away from Diana, his posture rigid with anger and dismissal. He looked cold, untouchable, like a stranger wearing his father's face. But it was his mother that made William's chest tighten with panic. Diana sat collapsed on the sofa, her beautiful face streaked with tears, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her. Her elegant evening dress was wrinkled, her hair disheveled, and she looked so small, so vulnerable, so utterly destroyed. "Charles, please," Diana begged, her voice barely above a whisper. "I love you. We have 2 beautiful children together. Isn't that worth fighting for?" Charles didn't even turn around. "Diana, this conversation is over. I suggest you compose yourself before the children see you like this." "The children? You're worried about the children seeing me upset, but you don't care that your actions are destroying their family?" "I am not destroying anything. I am simply refusing to be manipulated by your emotional outbursts." Diana's response was a sound William had never heard before, a keening wail of pure anguish that made his 8-year-old heart feel like it was cracking apart. She buried her face in her hands, her whole body shaking with grief, and William wanted nothing more than to run to her, to hold her, to somehow fix whatever was making his beautiful, strong mother fall apart. But before he could move, Diana looked up, her tear-stained face catching the light from the fire, and whispered words that would echo in William's mind for decades. "What did I do wrong, Charles? What is so terrible about me that you can't love me the way you love her? The raw pain in those words hit William like a physical blow. This wasn't just an argument. This was his mother's heart breaking, and his father was watching it happen with complete indifference. You won't believe what happened when Diana discovered William watching. The mother's protective instinct. 11:52 p.m., the moment that defined their bond. As William knelt by the door, tears streaming down his young face as he watched his mother's anguish, a floorboard creaked under his small weight. The sound was barely audible, but Diana's maternal instincts were finely tuned to her children's presence. William, Diana's voice was immediately different, softer, controlled, protective. "Darling, is that you?" William panicked. He had been caught eavesdropping on something he clearly wasn't meant to witness, but before he could run back to his room, the door opened, and Diana stood there, quickly wiping her tears and trying to compose herself. "Oh, my darling boy," she whispered, immediately dropping to her knees to meet William at eye level. "What are you doing out of bed?" William's lower lip trembled as he looked into his mother's red, swollen eyes. Even at 8, he could see she was trying to be strong for him, but the devastation was written all over her face. "Mummy," he whispered, his small voice breaking, "why are you crying?" The question hit Diana like a dagger to the heart. In that moment, she realized that her son had witnessed something no child should ever see, his mother being emotionally destroyed by his father. Diana glanced back at Charles, who had finally turned around but remained by the fireplace, his face a mask of cold disapproval. No help would come from that direction. Their son had just seen his father reduce his mother to tears, and Charles showed no intention of explaining or comforting anyone. "Come here, my love," Diana whispered, pulling William into her arms. He was small for his age, still her little boy, and she could feel his whole body trembling against hers. "Mummy, are you hurt?" William asked, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "Did Papa hurt you?" Diana's heart shattered completely. Her 8-year-old son was trying to protect her from his own father. "No, darling," she whispered, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. "Mummy and Papa were just talking about grown-up things. Sometimes grown-ups disagree, but that doesn't mean anyone is hurt." But William was too smart, too perceptive. He pulled back to look at her face, his blue eyes, so like hers, filled with wisdom far beyond his years. "But you are hurt, Mummy. I can see it." Diana realized in that moment that she could either lie to her son or help him understand that witnessing pain didn't make him responsible for fixing it. She chose honesty, tempered with love. "Sometimes, my darling, grown-ups have feelings that are too big and complicated for children to understand. What you saw tonight was Mummy having big feelings, but that's not something for you to worry about. But I do worry about you, Mummy. You look so sad." Diana held her son tighter, her own tears threatening to return. "That's because you have such a loving, caring heart, William. But your job is to be 8 years old, to play and learn and be happy. My job is to take care of the grown-up problems." Charles's voice cut through their tender moment like ice. "Diana, the child should be in bed. This is entirely inappropriate." The coldness in his father's voice made William flinch, and Diana felt her protective instincts surge. "Charles," she said quietly, but with steel in her voice, "your son was frightened by what he heard. Perhaps you could show some concern for that. I'm concerned about proper boundaries and bedtimes." Diana looked at her husband with contempt. Even now, with their child clearly distressed, Charles could only think about protocol and control. The secret letter. The next morning, Diana's promise to her son. The following morning, after a sleepless night spent replaying every heartbreaking moment, Diana made a decision that would bind her to William in a way that transcended the normal parent-child relationship. She wrote him a letter, not a formal note, but a real letter, honest and full of love, explaining what he had witnessed and making him a promise that would shape the rest of both their lives. William found the letter slipped under his bedroom door when he woke up, written on his mother's personal stationery, in her distinctive handwriting, "My dearest William, my dearest William. Last night you saw Mummy very sad, and I know that frightened you. I want you to understand some important things, not because you need to worry about grown-up problems, but because you deserve honesty from the people who love you. Sometimes people who are supposed to love each other very much stop being able to make each other happy. This doesn't mean either person is bad, it just means they're not right for each other anymore. This is what's happening with Papa and me. But here's what I need you to know, and I need you to never ever forget this. None of this is your fault. You and Harry are the most precious, perfect things that ever came from Papa and me being together. You are loved completely and forever, no matter what happens between the grown-ups. I also need you to know that seeing me cry doesn't mean you have to take care of me. That's not your job, my darling boy. Your job is to be wonderful, curious, kind, William, and to let the grown-ups handle the grown-up problems. But if you ever feel scared or confused about what you see or hear, you can always come to me. Always. Any time of day or night. I will always make time for you, always listen to you, and always tell you the truth in a way that helps instead of hurts. You asked me why I was crying, and the answer is that sometimes grown-ups cry when they feel very alone or misunderstood. But you know what? Having you as my son means I'm never really alone. Your love makes me strong, even when I feel weak. I love you to the moon and back, forever and always, Mummy. P.S. This letter is just between us. Sometimes mothers and sons need special secrets that are full of love. Don't miss this emotional revelation. How this letter changed William forever. The promise that shaped a future king. December 1987. The birth of William's protective instinct. Reading his mother's letter, 8-year-old William felt something shift inside him. The fear and confusion from the night before transformed into something deeper, more powerful, a determination to protect the woman who loved him enough to be honest with him when the world around them was full of lies. William kept that letter hidden in his school books, reading it whenever he felt scared or confused about his parents' relationship. It became his anchor, proof that even when everything else was falling apart, his mother's love for him was constant and true. More importantly, the letter taught William that love sometimes meant being brave enough to see painful truths, and that real strength came from facing those truths with honesty and compassion. Over the following months and years, as his parents' marriage continued to deteriorate publicly and privately, William carried the wisdom from that letter with him. When other royal children might have been shielded from reality with lies and fairy tales, William learned to navigate pain with integrity. He also learned something else crucial, that his mother was not weak despite what his father and the press often implied. She was strong enough to be vulnerable, honest enough to admit when she was hurting, and loving enough to protect her children's emotional well-being even when her own world was crashing down. But perhaps most importantly, William learned that witnessing someone's pain created a responsibility, not to fix them, but to honor their struggle by becoming someone worthy of their sacrifice. The ripple effects. Lomon and how one night changed everything. That December night in 1987 created a bond between Diana and William that would influence every major decision of his adult life. The 8-year-old boy who watched his mother's heart break became the man who would spend his life ensuring that no one he loved would ever suffer such betrayal. William's choice of Catherine as his wife was directly influenced by what he witnessed that night. He chose a woman whose strength came from stability, not drama, whose love was grounded in loyalty, not passion, whose character was built on steadiness, not volatility. He learned from his mother's pain that love without respect is ultimately destructive, and that marriage requires both partners to choose each other every day, not just in the beginning. The letter Diana wrote to her son also shaped William's approach to parenthood. When George, Charlotte, and Louis faced difficult moments, William remembers his mother's honesty and compassion, her ability to acknowledge pain without burdening children with adult responsibility. Most significantly, that night planted the seeds of William's eventual confrontation with his father about Camilla. The boy who watched his mother beg for love from a man who had already given his heart to someone else became the man who would never allow that betrayal to be legitimized or forgotten. The lasting legacy. Diana's letter to William wasn't just a moment of maternal comfort. It was a masterclass in emotional intelligence that would shape a future king's understanding of love, loyalty, and leadership. In protecting her son from despair while acknowledging his intelligence, Diana created a template for how royal children could be raised with both honesty and hope. In showing William that strength could coexist with vulnerability, she gave him permission to feel deeply while acting wisely. And in trusting him with the truth about her pain, she ensured that he would never underestimate the cost of betrayal or take love for granted. The truth revealed. The night William heard Diana cry was more than a childhood trauma. It was the moment that defined his understanding of what marriage should and shouldn't be, what love looks like when it's real versus when it's performed, and what it means to protect the people you love from those who would hurt them. Diana's letter to her son created a secret bond that sustained both of them through the darkest years of the royal family's dysfunction. It was proof that even in the midst of a crumbling marriage and a hostile institution, a mother's love could still create something pure and powerful enough to change the future. When William eventually chose Catherine, married her with his mother's ring, and built a family based on the values Diana taught him in that letter, he was fulfilling a promise made not in words but in understanding, the promise that her pain would not be meaningless, that her love would live on, and that the cycle of betrayal and heartbreak would end with him. Some nights change everything. Some letters last forever. Some promises between mothers and sons are strong enough to heal a broken lineage. That December night in 1987, an 8-year-old boy learned what love looked like when it was honest, protective, and unbreakable. And that lesson became the foundation of everything he would build as a man.